My house was destroyed by a tornado. So I went to my son's place. He said, "We want privacy. My girlfriend doesn't want you here." So I called my old high school love, a self-made millionaire. Nobody knew I still had his number. When he showed up and said 3 words, everything changed forever. Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Marie Adams from Los Angeles, California. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. My name is Dorothy, and at 72 years old, I learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what really matters. The storm came on a Thursday morning when I was feeding my cats. The weather lady on TV kept saying dangerous storms were coming, but I didn't listen. I was busy making lunch for my neighbor who broke her leg. The wind started making scary noises outside my little blue house. Sounded like wild animals growling. My 3 cats, Whiskers, Mittens, and Snowball, all ran under the couch. Animals know when bad things are coming. The sky turned dark green like old soup, and I got scared. I grabbed my purse and the photo of my late husband Charlie from the kitchen table. Then I heard a sound like a train was coming right through my living room. The tornado warning on my phone was loud and scary. Big tornado heading toward Pine Street. That was my street. I had maybe 5 minutes to get ready. My hands were shaking as I put important papers and Charlie's wedding ring in a bag. 38 years of memories, and I could only save what fit in one small suitcase. My wedding dress, Charlie's favorite coffee mug, the quilt my mother made. Everything else would have to stay behind. The basement was cold and dark. I sat in the corner with Charlie's old jacket, listening to the monster outside trying to eat my house. My house was shaking like it was dancing. The walls were creaking and groaning like they were in pain. Charlie had painted those walls himself when we first got married in 1975. He was so proud of our little house with the red door and white fence. The noise got louder and louder until it felt like the whole world was screaming. Then suddenly it was quiet. Too quiet. Like when you turn off loud music and your ears still ring. When I finally climbed up the basement stairs, my legs felt like jelly. Where my kitchen used to be, I could see clouds. There was no roof anymore. Just sky where my ceiling should be. My refrigerator was in the neighbor's yard. The apple tree Charlie planted for our anniversary was gone. My flower garden looked like someone had mixed it up in a giant blender. I stood there in what used to be my home and cried harder than I had cried since Charlie's funeral 10 years ago. Mrs. Johnson from across the street came running over. Her house was damaged too, but she still wanted to help me. The Red Cross people set up beds in the school gym, but sleeping with strangers felt wrong. My son David lives 1 hour away in the city. He has a big house with fancy furniture and a pool in the backyard. He moved there 3 years ago when he got a new job at the bank. We don't talk much anymore, maybe once a month on holidays. But he's my only child, my only family left in the world. I used Mrs. Johnson's phone because mine was buried somewhere under my bedroom. My fingers were still shaking as I pressed his number. "David, honey, it's Mom." My voice sounded small and scared. "Mom, what's wrong? You sound upset." "Tornado hit my house, sweetheart. Everything is gone." There was a long pause. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm okay, but I need a place to stay while I figure things out. Just for a little while." Another pause that felt like forever. "Course, Mom. Come stay with us. We'll figure this out together." I felt so happy and relieved. My son would take care of me. Even though we hadn't been close lately. He was still my little boy who used to help me bake cookies. I spent the next morning looking through the mess that used to be my life. The insurance man came with his clipboard and camera. He looked bored, like this happened every day. "Total loss," he said, like he was talking about old furniture, not my whole life. "How much money will I get?" I asked, scared to hear the answer. "Well, your house was worth $85,000, but after what you have to pay in wear and tear, maybe $60,000. $60,000 to rebuild 38 years of memories. Seemed impossible. Mrs. Johnson helped me pack my clothes into garbage bags. They smelled like mud and sadness. I also had one suitcase with pictures and papers, and Charlie's toolbox that somehow survived in the garage. That was everything I had left of my old life. The drive to David's house felt like going to a different planet. Everything looked strange when you had no home to go back to. The places I knew, like the grocery store where I bought cat food and the diner where Charlie and I ate breakfast on Sundays, they all felt like they belonged to someone else now. David's neighborhood was perfect and clean. Every house looked like it came from a magazine. Perfect grass, perfect driveways, perfect families living perfect lives. I felt like I was bringing my disaster into their clean world. His house was big with white columns and a shiny black door that his girlfriend Emma had picked. I'd only met Emma twice in the year they'd been dating. She was 28 and worked at a law office downtown. She had opinions about everything. I sat in Mrs. Johnson's car for a minute, trying to be brave. This was temporary, I told myself. Just until the insurance money came and I could find a small apartment. I never thought walking to my son's door with 3 bags would be one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But as I lifted my hand to knock, I felt that same empty feeling I had when Charlie died. Like the ground was disappearing under my feet. I didn't know how much further I was about to fall. David opened the door before I could knock. For a second, seeing his face that looked so much like Charlie's, I felt like everything would be okay. "Mom," he said, but his voice sounded far away. Emma appeared behind him right away, like she was waiting. She was wearing a white dress that probably cost more than I used to spend on food in a month. Her hair was perfect, and her smile looked fake. "Dorothy, how terrible about your house," she said, but she was looking at my garbage bags, not at me. David told me what happened. I set my bags down in their fancy hallway. Everything was so clean and white. I suddenly felt dirty and out of place. "It's just temporary," I said quickly. "Just until I get back on my feet." David and Emma looked at each other in a way that made me feel left out. "Let's sit down and talk," David said, leading me to their living room. Their house was beautiful like pictures in magazines. Everything was white and expensive looking. Nothing was out of place. The furniture looked like no one ever sat on it. I sat carefully on their white couch, worried my shoes would make it dirty. Emma noticed and looked annoyed. "So what's your plan?" David asked, sitting across from me instead of next to me like a loving son would. "Well, the insurance man said it will take a few weeks, maybe a month. I was hoping I could stay here until then, just until I find a small place." The silence went on too long. Emma's face changed. She put her hand on David's arm like she owned him. "Mom," David started, and I knew from his voice that he was going to break my heart. "The thing is, Emma and I really need our space here. We both work hard and this house is our peaceful place." I blinked, confused. "I wouldn't bother you. I could help cook and clean. I wouldn't cause any trouble." Emma leaned forward. Her voice was sweet but mean. "It's not about trouble, Dorothy. It's about having our own space. This is our first home together, and we're still learning how to live as a couple." "But I'm his mother," I said, my voice getting louder. "Of course you are," Emma said smoothly. "That's exactly why we think you'd be happier somewhere else. Somewhere you can be independent while you rebuild." I looked at David, waiting for him to tell her she was wrong. I waited for him to remember I was the woman who stayed up all night when he had the flu, who worked extra jobs to pay for his college books, who held him when he cried after his first girlfriend broke his heart. Instead he nodded. "Emma's right, Mom. We think you'd be more comfortable with your own space." The words hit me like someone had punched me in the stomach. "More comfortable, David. I lost everything yesterday. Everything. And you think I'd be more comfortable alone in some cheap motel than here with my family?" "It doesn't have to be a motel," Emma said quickly. "There are nice hotels near the shopping center. Very clean and safe, with little kitchens so you can cook." I stared at this woman who'd been in my son's life for 1 year, telling me where I should live after losing my home. And how am I supposed to pay for this nice hotel? The insurance money won't come for weeks. David looked uncomfortable. I could give you some money to start. Few $100s. A few hundred. Like I was some stranger asking for charity. Not the woman who gave birth to him. David, I said quietly. I changed your diapers. I taught you to walk and read. I bandaged your scraped knees and helped with your homework. I held you when you were scared. His face turned red, but Emma squeezed his arm tighter. Nobody's questioning your past, she said. We just think everyone would be happier with some boundaries. Boundaries. I'd heard that word from the counselor David saw after his breakup. Everything was about boundaries now. So you're kicking me out, I said. We're not kicking you out, David said. We're just saying this arrangement might not work for anyone. Whose idea was this? I asked, but I already knew. I could see it in how Emma sat back, looking satisfied like she had won something. We talked about it together, David said, but he wouldn't look at me. I stood up slowly. My knees hurt, reminding me I was 72 and alone. Missy, Mom, don't be like this. We're trying to do what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone? I repeated the words like they were in a foreign language. What would be best for everyone, David, is if your mother didn't have to sleep in her car tonight. Emma's perfect face tried to look concerned. You don't have to sleep in your car. Like I said, there are options. I looked around their perfect living room one more time. At the expensive furniture that no one was allowed to really use. At my son who had chosen this cold woman over his own mother. You're right, I said. There are always options. I picked up my 3 garbage bags and Charlie's toolbox. They felt heavier now that I knew I wasn't welcome. David stood up looking guilty, but not guilty enough to change his mind. I'll call you in a few days, he said. Once you get settled somewhere. Don't bother, I said, surprised my voice sounded so strong. I wouldn't want to disturb your peaceful space. Emma looked a little ashamed, but not enough to speak up. Not enough to say, wait, this is wrong. She's your mother. I walked out of that perfect house and sat in Mrs. Johnson's car for a long time before I could start the engine. Through their window I could see David and Emma talking, probably about how difficult I was being. How much trouble I was bringing to their clean lives. The funny thing was, I'd spent years after Charlie died telling myself I was strong and didn't need anyone. Now, when I really needed help, I found out that being strong is only easy when you have choices. I drove to a gas station and sat there as it got dark, trying to figure out where a 72-year-old woman with $47 and 3 bags of damaged clothes was supposed to sleep. The car was getting cold, and soon the store clerk would notice me and ask me to leave. That's when I remembered the old business card I'd kept in my purse for almost 55 years. Yellow and soft from being carried so long. A card from a boy I'd loved when I was young and the world was full of possibilities. Robert Chen, the boy who promised he'd come back for me before life got complicated, and he never returned. I pulled out my phone and looked at the faded numbers, wondering if they still worked, wondering if he was still alive. I spent 4 nights sleeping in that car before I got brave enough to call. 4 nights of waking up with a sore neck and feeling ashamed. 4 nights of moving from parking lot to parking lot so security guards wouldn't notice the old woman living in her car. 4 nights of using restaurant bathrooms to wash my face and brush my teeth, trying not to look at myself in the mirror because I couldn't stand what I saw. The business card felt like old tissue paper in my fingers. Robert Chen, it said in fading black ink. Below that, a phone number I didn't recognize. On the back, in my teenage handwriting, "Forever yours, D." I'd written that when I was 17, believing Robert would be the love of my life. He was 18 with black hair and kind brown eyes. He worked at his uncle's restaurant after school and dreamed of big things. We dated for 6 months, which felt like forever when you're 17. He used to take me to the park by the river where we'd sit on the swings and talk about our plans. He wanted to start his own business, maybe restaurants or hotels. Something that would make him successful enough to take care of me. "I'm going to come back for you, Dorothy." He'd promised the night before leaving for college in New York. "I'm going to build something amazing and then I'm going to come back and marry you." But promises made at 17 don't always survive real life. He wrote letters at first, sweet letters full of dreams. I wrote back telling him about my job at the flower shop and how I was waiting for him. Then the letters got shorter and less frequent. When I met Charlie 8 months later at a church dance, Robert felt like a sweet dream that wasn't real. Charlie was steady and reliable, already 30 with a good job fixing cars. He didn't promise me the world, but he promised me love, children, and security. When he asked me to marry him after 5 months, I said yes. I kept Robert's business card in my jewelry box, a secret I couldn't throw away. Now, 55 years later, sitting in a borrowed car, I wondered what had happened to that sweet boy with the kind eyes. I'd heard about him sometimes over the years, the way you do with first loves. Through old friends, I learned he'd kept his promises and started a restaurant business that grew big. Never married, which surprised everyone. Too busy building his success, people said. That Chen boy was always ambitious. The last I heard, maybe 15 years ago, was that his company had restaurants all over 3 states. Chen's Garden, fancy places where important people ate. The boy from his uncle's kitchen had become a man who owned buildings and employed hundreds of people. What would a man like that want with a 72-year-old widow sleeping in a car? My brain said it was crazy and embarrassing. You don't call someone after 55 years because your life fell apart. But thinking straight is hard when you're counting coins and wondering if you have enough for coffee. On the 5th morning, I couldn't take it anymore. My back hurt from sleeping curled up. My clothes smelled like the inside of a car, and I'd spent my last money on a gas station sandwich that tasted like cardboard. I sat in a burger place parking lot, staring at the card, my hands shaking from cold and fear. What would I say? "Hi Robert, remember me? I'm homeless now. Can you help?" The number was probably disconnected. Or some secretary would answer and say Mr. Chen was too important to talk to random old women. But what if he did answer? My heart pounded as I dialed the number. It rang once, twice. Chen's Garden corporate office. "This is Robert." His voice was deeper now, changed by time and responsibility, but still his. After 55 years, I would know that voice anywhere. I almost hung up, almost pressed end and drove away to find some other solution. But something in his voice, some warmth that reached through the phone and hugged me, made me speak. "Robert, this is Dorothy. Dorothy Martinez." Well, it's Dorothy Williams now, but it used to be Martinez. Silence so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Dorothy, just my name spoken like a prayer, like magic. "I'm sorry to call like this," I rushed on. "I know it's been forever and I shouldn't be calling, but I don't know who else to turn to." "Where are you?" He interrupted, his voice sharp with worry. "I'm in the city." "Well, in a parking lot in the city." I know this sounds crazy, but my house was destroyed in a tornado last week, and my son doesn't want me staying with him, and I have nowhere to go. The words tumbled out fast, each one harder to say. Telling someone that your own child had rejected you felt like admitting you'd failed as a person. "Give me your location," Robert said, all business now. "I'm coming to get you." "You don't have to do that." I don't even know why I called. I guess I just needed to hear a friendly voice. "Dorothy," he said, and his voice cracked. "No arguments. Tell me where you are." "I'm walking to my car right now." Through the phone I could hear a door closing, car keys jingling. He was really coming. This man I hadn't talked to in 55 years was leaving whatever important work he was doing to help me. I gave him the address, my voice barely a whisper. "Dorothy, I look different now. I'm not the girl you remember." "Neither am I," he said, and I could hear him smiling. "But I've been hoping for this call for 55 years. After we hung up, I sat in that parking lot for 3 hours, switching between panic and amazement. What was I doing? What were we doing? This was insane. You can't just restart relationships after 55 years like you're picking up where you left off yesterday. But as I watched the parking lot entrance, waiting for a car I wouldn't recognize, I felt something I hadn't felt since the tornado warning started. Oh, maybe it was silly hope. Maybe it would lead to more heartbreak, but it was hope. And at 72, with nothing left to lose, hope was worth the risk. At exactly 2:15, a black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot, moving slowly like the driver was looking for someone. I watched through my windshield as the car came closer, my heart beating like a drum. The windows were dark, so I couldn't see inside, but something in my heart told me this was him. The car stopped 2 spaces from mine, and the driver's door opened. Even after 55 years, even with gray hair and wrinkles, even carrying the weight of decades we hadn't shared, I knew him right away. Robert Chan stepped out like he was stepping out of my memories. When his eyes found mine through my windshield, the years disappeared like they'd never existed. Robert walked to my car with the same gentle confidence he'd had at 18, but now it was polished by success. He wore a dark suit that probably cost more than I used to make in a month. But his eyes, those warm brown eyes that had filled my teenage dreams, were exactly the same. I wanted to hide, to disappear into my seat. I looked terrible. My hair was greasy from not washing it properly. My clothes were wrinkled from sleeping in them, and I smelled like failure. But he was already at my door, tapping softly on the window with a smile that made my heart skip like I was 17 again. I rolled down the window, suddenly unable to breathe. "Hello, Dorothy," he said softly. Close, I could see how time had changed him. His black hair was silver now, cut neat and professional. Lines marked his face around his eyes and mouth. He was bigger through the chest, more solid, like success had given him physical presence. But when he smiled at me through that car window, I saw the boy who used to take me to the park and tell me about his dreams. "Hi," I whispered. He looked at my face for a long moment, those brown eyes taking in every detail. I wanted to apologize for how I looked, for how low I'd fallen, for calling him after all these years with nothing but problems. Instead, he said 3 words that changed everything. "You're still beautiful." I started crying right there in that parking lot with Robert Chen standing by my car. I broke down completely. 55 years of held-back tears, 5 days of sleeping rough, a lifetime of being told I wasn't good enough. It all poured out in ugly sobs I couldn't control. He didn't say anything else. Didn't try to quiet me or tell me everything would be fine. He just opened my car door, helped me out, and wrapped his arms around me while I fell apart. He smelled like expensive soap and clean clothes, like success and safety, like everything I'd lost and never had. His suit jacket was soft against my cheek, and his arms were strong around my shaking shoulders. "I'm sorry," I gasped. "I'm so sorry, Robert. I shouldn't have called. I shouldn't have brought you into this mess." "Sure," he whispered, his hand rubbing my back. "You should have called decades ago." When the tears finally stopped, I pulled back to look at him, embarrassed by the wet spot on his expensive jacket. I must look awful. He reached up and wiped a tear from my cheek, his touch soft as a feather. "You look like someone who's been through hell and survived." "That's not awful, Dorothy. That's brave." I laughed, but it sounded bitter. "Brave. I'm 72, sleeping in a borrowed car because my own son doesn't want me. That's not brave. That's pathetic." His jaw got tight, and I saw a flash of anger. "Your son is a fool. You don't know him." "I don't need to. I know you." He paused, his hands still on my shoulders. "Or at least I knew you. And the Dorothy Martinez I knew would never turn away someone who needed help, especially family." The way he said my old name like it was something precious he'd kept safe, made my chest ache. "That was a long time ago," I said. I'm not that girl anymore. Maybe not, he agreed. But I'd like to meet the woman she became. He helped me get my sad belongings from the car, the 3 garbage bags, Charlie's toolbox, my purse with almost no money. If he was shocked by how little I had left, he didn't show it. He put everything in his Mercedes, like my tornado-damaged clothes and broken memories were treasure. Where are we going? I asked as he opened the passenger door for me. Home, he said simply. The drive took an hour, through neighborhoods that got fancier and fancier until we reached an area I'd never seen. Rolling hills with mansions hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. Trees that looked professionally planted. Mailboxes that probably cost more than most people's cars. Robert turned into a long driveway marked with a small gold sign that said Chen. The driveway curved through tall trees and perfect gardens before opening to a circular drive in front of a house that took my breath away. It wasn't flashy or showing off. It was elegant the way real wealth is elegant. Quiet, confident, built to last forever. Stone and wood with huge windows that caught the sunlight and a porch that invited you to sit and stay. Robert, I breathed, staring at this monument to everything he'd achieved. This is incredible. He parked but didn't get out right away. Instead, he sat looking at the house like he was seeing it through my eyes. It's too big, he said quietly. Always has been. I built it thinking I'd fill it someday, but he shrugged, a gesture so familiar it made my heart hurt. Some dreams don't work out how you plan. You never got married. The question slipped out before I could stop it. He turned to look at me, his face unreadable. Came close several times, but something was always missing. What? You, he said simply, like it was obvious. The word hung between us in the quiet car, loaded with 55 years of what-ifs and might-have-beens. I wanted to ask what he meant, but before I could find words, he was getting out, coming around to open my door. The house was even more amazing inside. Wooden floors that gleamed like gold, ceilings that reached toward heaven, furniture that looked like museum pieces. But it didn't feel cold or empty. There were books everywhere, comfortable chairs by windows, photos scattered on tables. It felt like a home where someone actually lived, not just a display of wealth. Are you hungry? Robert asked, leading me to a kitchen bigger than my whole house had been. I was about to make dinner when you called. I realized I was starving. The gas station sandwich from yesterday felt like a week ago, and my stomach was cramping from emptiness and nerves. I don't want to be trouble, I started, but he stopped me with a look. Dorothy, stop. You're not trouble. He paused, searching for words. You're the answer I've been waiting 55 years to hear. While he cooked, and he really could cook, moving around that huge kitchen easily, I studied the photos around the room. Robert at grand openings, cutting ribbons, shaking hands with important people. Robert with different women at fancy parties and business dinners, always smiling but never looking complete. Tell me about your life, he said, setting a plate of perfect stir-fry in front of me. Tell me about Charlie, about your son, about everything I missed. So I did. Over dinner that tasted like heaven after days of junk food. I told him about my marriage to Charlie. Good, steady Charlie who'd given me security and companionship if not passion. About David, the baby I'd wanted desperately and loved completely. Who'd grown up to be a stranger who chose his girlfriend's comfort over his mother's needs. I told him about being a good wife, a good mother, a good widow. About the tornado that took everything I owned and the son who took everything I had left. Robert listened without interrupting, his brown eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry, he said finally. I'm sorry about Charlie, about your house, about your son. But I'm not sorry you called me. Why? The question came out smaller than I meant. He reached across the table and took my hand. Still strong, still gentle, still able to make my heart race. Because I never stopped loving you, he said quietly. Because every restaurant I opened, every success I had, every dollar I made, it was so I could be worthy of you when you came back to me. Robert, I know it sounds crazy. I know 55 years is forever, and we're different people now. But when I heard your voice today, it was like the missing piece of my life finally came home. I stared at our joined hands, his smooth and manicured, mine rough and showing every year. I'm not the girl you remember. No, he agreed. You're better. You're real. You've lived and loved and lost and survived. That 17-year-old girl was sweet, but she was just possibility. You're the woman that possibility became. The words wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket, healing wounds I didn't know still hurt. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt seen. Not as someone's mother or wife or burden, but as myself. What happens now? Yes. Robert smiled, that same wonderful smile that had made me fall in love with him when we were young. Now we figure out what the rest of our lives look like. Together, if you'll let me. As I sat in his beautiful kitchen full of good food and hope, I realized that sometimes the storm that destroys your old life is just making room for the life you were always supposed to have. Living with Robert was like remembering a version of myself I'd forgotten. The first week was strange, dancing around each other like polite strangers. He gave me the whole guest area of his house, a bedroom bigger than my old living room, a bathroom with a tub for two, and a sitting room overlooking his gardens. I felt like I was staying in a fancy hotel, afraid to touch anything. But Robert was patient the way successful people learn to be. Slowly I began to relax. He had a cleaning lady, Sophia, who came twice a week. But on other days I found myself cooking for him. Started small, making coffee, fixing simple meals. But Robert loved everything with the joy of someone who'd been eating restaurant food for decades. "This is amazing," he said one night, enjoying the chicken and rice I'd made using my grandmother's recipe. "I haven't had home cooking like this in years." "It's nothing special," I said. But inside I glowed. When was the last time someone had appreciated my cooking? David used to complain that I made boring food. Emma had suggested I try more modern recipes. Robert shook his head. "It's perfect. You're perfect." That word perfect should have made me uncomfortable. I was 72 with gray hair and wrinkles. My hands were spotted with age. My body soft where it used to be firm. I was far from perfect. But when Robert looked at me, I saw myself in his eyes as someone beautiful, someone worthy of love and gentle care. We fell into routines that felt natural as breathing. Morning coffee together on the back deck where Robert read business reports and I watched the birds at his fancy feeders. Afternoon walks around his property where he showed me gardens he'd planted and the greenhouse where he grew exotic flowers. Evenings were for talking. We had 55 years to catch up on, and we did it slowly, carefully, like handling precious things. I told him about the hard years after Charlie died when I worked at the grocery store to pay bills. About the loneliness of being a widow. How people treat you like half a person once your husband is gone. He told me about his business. How it grew from one small restaurant into a company with locations across 3 states. About the women he'd dated over the years. Smart, successful women who looked perfect with him at charity events but never made him feel whole. "There was this one woman," he said one evening as we sat by his fireplace. Rain patting the windows. "Linda, she was a doctor, brilliant, beautiful. Everyone said we were made for each other. I felt jealous, which surprised me." "What happened?" "I asked her to marry me," he said quietly. "New Year's Eve 3 years ago. Big fancy party, ring from the best jewelry store, everything she dreamed of." She said yes. We planned the wedding for the next New Year. But as the date got closer, I kept feeling something was wrong. Not with her. She was everything anyone could want in a wife. But with me. He paused, staring at the fire. "The week before the wedding I called it off." "Robert, no." "What did you tell her?" "The truth." He looked at me, his brown eyes serious. "That I was still in love with a girl I'd known 55 years ago, and it wouldn't be fair to marry her while my heart belonged to someone else." The words hit me like lightning. "You canceled your wedding because of me. Because of the memory of you. Because of the hope that someday you might need me and I'd be here." I stared at him, this successful, handsome man who could have had anyone, trying to understand what he was saying. "That's crazy. Is it?" He leaned forward, taking my hands. "Is it any crazier than you keeping my business card in your purse for 55 years? He was right. We were both crazy, both living with memories of what might have been. But somehow, our particular kind of crazy had brought us back together. 2 weeks into staying with Robert, David called. I was in Robert's kitchen making soup and humming to myself. Actually humming, something I hadn't done in years, when my phone rang. David's name made my stomach tight with worry. "Hi sweetheart," I said, trying to sound normal. "Mom," his voice was strange, controlled. "I've been trying to call you. Your phone keeps going to voicemail." That was true. I'd been ignoring calls, not ready to deal with whatever guilt David might throw at me. "I've been busy," I said. "Busy doing what?" "Mom, Mrs. Johnson said you left that hotel weeks ago. Where are you living?" I looked around Robert's beautiful kitchen, at the fresh roses he'd brought home, at the expensive wine glasses on the counter. "I'm staying with a friend." "What friend?" "Mom, you don't have friends with money." His assumption hurt, partly because it had been true for so long. After Charlie died, I'd let friendships fade. Too tired and too proud to keep relationships when I had nothing to give back. "You'd be surprised," I said coolly. There was a pause, and I could hear him thinking. "Mom, I think we need to talk. Emma and I have been discussing things, and we think maybe we made a mistake. Maybe you could stay in our guest room for a while, just until you get settled." The offer that would have meant everything a month ago now felt empty, even insulting. "What changed your mind?" Another pause. We realized we might have been too focused on ourselves. Family should help family. What he meant, I knew, was that he'd probably heard through neighbors that his mother wasn't living in a shelter. Someone had seen her with a well-dressed man in an expensive car. David was curious, and curiosity had made him generous. "That's very thoughtful," I said. "But I'm perfectly happy where I am." "Mom, you can't just move in with some stranger. It's not safe." "What do you even know about this person?" "I know that he's never made me feel like a burden," I said quietly. "I know that he values my company and loves my cooking and tells me I'm beautiful every single day." The silence that followed was so long I thought he might have hung up. "Is this some kind of romance?" David finally asked, his voice tight with something I couldn't identify. Embarrassment? Disapproval? "I don't think that's your business," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "Course it's my business. You're my mother. I'm worried about you being taken advantage of. Like you took advantage of me." The words came out before I could stop them, sharp and bitter. "Mom, that's not fair." "Isn't it? You turned me away when I needed help most. You chose your girlfriend's comfort over your mother's safety. And now that you think I might have found happiness somewhere else, suddenly you care about my welfare." I could hear Emma's voice in the background, but couldn't make out words. "Look," David said, his tone shifting to that reasonable voice he used when he thought I was being difficult. "Why don't you bring your friend to dinner Sunday? We'd like to meet him." "No," I said firmly. "No, David. You don't get to approve or disapprove of my choices anymore. You gave up that right when you kicked me out." "We didn't kick you out. We just thought. You thought about yourselves just like you're doing now." I took a deep breath, feeling stronger than I had in years. "I'm happy, David. Really happy for the first time in longer than I can remember. If you want to be part of my life, you're welcome to try. But you don't get to make the rules anymore." I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking from the adrenaline of finally saying what I should have said weeks ago. Robert found me a few minutes later, standing at the kitchen window staring at his gardens without really seeing them. "Everything okay?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I leaned back against his chest, letting his warmth chase away the chill of dealing with David. "My son called. He wants to meet you." "Good," Robert said, kissing the top of my head. "I've been looking forward to meeting him." I turned in his arms, studying his face. "You're not worried about what he'll think, what he'll say?" Robert smiled, that confident smile that had first made me fall in love with him. "Dorothy, I've been waiting 55 years for you to come back to me. I'm not about to let anyone, not even your son, make you doubt that you belong here." As I stood in his arms in that beautiful kitchen, I realized he was right. I did belong here. Not because of his money or his house or his success, but because of the way he looked at me like I was the answer to every prayer he'd ever whispered. For the first time since the tornado, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The wedding was nothing like my first one. When I married Charlie 48 years ago, it was all about what other people expected. White dress, church ceremony, reception at the community hall with a band and potluck dinner. We invited everyone we knew and several we didn't like because that's what you did. You performed the ceremony for everyone else, not yourselves. This time Robert and I did exactly what we wanted. The ceremony happened in his back garden on a sunny November morning, 4 months after that phone call in the parking lot. The minister was Robert's old friend, and our only witnesses were Sophia the housekeeper and Michael, Robert's business partner and best friend for 25 years. I wore a simple purple dress that Robert said made my eyes sparkle, and he wore a navy suit that made him look handsome and distinguished. No stress, no drama, no worry about impressing anyone. Just two people who'd found each other again after 55 years, promising to spend whatever time they had left together. David came to the wedding. I'd wondered whether to invite him, but Robert convinced me to try once more. He's your son, Robert said simply. You'll regret it if you don't give him the chance to do right. So I called him 2 weeks before the ceremony. Robert and I are getting married, I said without introduction. November 12th at 3 o'clock. You're welcome to come, but Emma isn't invited. The silence stretched so long I thought he might have disconnected. Mom, he finally said, you barely know this man. I've known him longer than I knew your father when I married him. That was different. You were young then. Yes, I was. And I made choices based on what I thought I should do, not what I wanted to do. I'm not making that mistake again. Another pause. What about Emma? She's part of my life. If you can't accept her, I can accept her, I interrupted. But I won't be controlled by her. She made it clear I wasn't welcome in your home when I needed help. Now she's not welcome at my wedding. Actions have consequences, David. He showed up alone, looking uncomfortable in a suit that probably cost more than my old monthly budget. He shook hands with Robert politely, made appropriate small talk, and even managed to smile when the minister said we were husband and wife. But I could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he noticed Robert's house, his car, the obvious signs of wealth. This wasn't about supporting his mother's happiness. This was about positioning himself for whatever might come next. After the ceremony, as we sat around Robert's dining table sharing the simple lunch Sophia had prepared, David cleared his throat. So Robert, he said with forced casualness, Mom mentioned you're in restaurants. That must be interesting work. Robert smiled, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. He recognized what was happening too. It has its moments. I'm in insurance myself, commercial properties mostly. We should talk sometime about potential opportunities. Perhaps, Robert said mildly, then changed the subject. But David wasn't discouraged. Over the following weeks, he began calling regularly, something he hadn't done in years. He'd ask about my health, my happiness, how I was adjusting to married life. But somehow every conversation ended up circling back to Robert's business, Robert's investments, Robert's plans for the future. The worst part was watching him try to charm Robert during our occasional dinners together. David had inherited his father's natural charm, and he used it like a tool, telling Robert stories designed to show what a devoted son he was, how much he'd always appreciated everything I'd done for him. It was all lies, of course. Revisionist history designed to position himself as the loving child who deserved to benefit from his mother's good fortune. Robert saw through it immediately, but he was too polite to say anything directly. Instead, he'd squeeze my hand under the table during David's performances, a silent reminder that he understood exactly what was happening. Emma, meanwhile, had apparently decided that if she couldn't beat me, she'd join me. She started sending gifts, expensive lotions, gourmet teas, a silk blouse that probably cost more than I used to spend on clothes in 6 months. Each gift came with a card expressing how happy she was that I'd found love again, how she hoped we could be friends. She's trying to buy her way back into your good graces, Robert observed one evening as I unwrapped another peace offering. I know, I said, setting aside the cashmere sweater she'd sent. The question is, what does she think she's buying? We found out 2 months later. David called one evening while Robert was at a business meeting. His voice tight with fake concern. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I hope you won't be upset. My stomach dropped. What is it? Have you and Robert talked about what happens to his money when, well, in the future? There it was. The question he'd been building up to for months. David, that's completely inappropriate. I'm just worried about you. You're older now, and if something happened to Robert, I want to make sure you're protected, that you're not taken advantage of by his business partners or distant family or whoever. The nerve of it took my breath away. The same son who'd turned me away when I was homeless was now concerned about my financial future. My money situation is none of your business, I said coldly. Course it is. You're my mother. When I needed help, you turned me away. Remember. You and Emma decided I would be too much trouble, too disruptive to your perfect life. Mom, we've talked about this. We made a mistake. Yes, you did. And now you're making another one. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking with anger. But underneath the anger was hurt, the deep, constant ache of realizing that even now, even after everything, my son saw me as an opportunity rather than a person. Robert found me crying in our bedroom when he got home from his meeting. What happened? He asked, immediately crossing to wrap his arms around me. I told him about David's call, about the months of obvious manipulation, about my growing certainty that my son would never see me as anything more than a potential inheritance. Robert listened without interrupting, his jaw growing tighter with each detail. I'm sorry, he said when I finished. I'm sorry your son is too selfish to see what an amazing woman his mother is. I keep thinking I failed him somehow. That if I'd been a better mother, he'd be a better man. Robert cupped my face in his hands, his brown eyes serious. Dorothy, you raised him the best way you knew how. He's made his own choices as an adult, and those choices reflect on him, not on you. 1 week later, Robert called David and Emma to the house. He didn't ask me first, just announced at breakfast that I spent the day nervous, unsure what Robert had planned. But when David and Emma arrived that evening, I saw a side of my new husband I'd never seen before. Robert Chen, the successful businessman, was impressive in a way that made grown people reconsider their actions. He was polite, gracious even, but there was strength underneath the courtesy that would have been clear to anyone paying attention. I wanted to talk to you both about Dorothy, he said once we'd finished Sophia's excellent dinner and moved to the living room. About your relationship with her and about certain expectations that seem to have developed. David shifted uncomfortably. I'm not sure what you mean. I think you do. Robert's voice was pleasant, conversational, and absolutely firm. You've been very interested in my business, my investments, my plans for the future. You've been treating your mother with a level of attention and concern that's remarkably different from how you treated her when she actually needed your help. Emma started to speak, but Robert held up a hand. I'm not finished. I want to be very clear about something. Dorothy doesn't need your approval for our marriage, your permission to be happy, or your protection from gold diggers. What she needs, what she's always needed, is for you to love her unconditionally, the way she's loved you your entire life. David's face was red with embarrassment and anger. I do love my mother. Do you? Because from where I sit, it looks like you love what you think she might inherit. You turned her away when she had nothing, and you're courting her now that she's married to someone with money. That's not love, David. That's greed. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Emma was staring at her hands, her face pale. David was glaring at Robert with obvious resentment. I think, Robert continued quietly, that you need to decide what kind of relationship you actually want with your mother. If you want to be part of her life because you genuinely care about her happiness, you're welcome here anytime. But if you're here because you think there's something in it for you, you're wasting everyone's time. After they left, Emma practically pulling David out the door before he could say something that would make things worse, Robert and I sat in his living room, holding hands in comfortable silence. Was I too harsh? He asked eventually. Thought about it. About the years of taking David's calls out of duty rather than joy. About the way he'd made me feel like a burden rather than a blessing. No, I said finally. You were honest. Maybe for the first time in his life, someone told him the truth about his behavior. That was 6 months ago. David calls sometimes now, but the conversations are different. Shorter, more real, less calculated. He asks about my garden, my book club, my volunteer work at the animal rescue. He doesn't ask about Robert's business anymore. Emma has stopped sending gifts. I don't know if we'll ever have the close relationship I once dreamed of having with my son, but we have something honest now, something real. And maybe at 72 that's enough. This morning, I woke up in Robert's arms, my husband's arms, in the bedroom that's become ours, in the house that's become home. Sunlight streamed through windows that overlook gardens we tend together, and I could smell the coffee Robert makes every morning before I wake up. At 72 years old, I'm happier than I've ever been. Not because of Robert's money or his beautiful house or his success, but because someone sees me, really sees me, and chooses to love what he sees. The tornado took my old life, tore it apart and scattered the pieces. But sometimes, I think as I watch Robert reading his morning paper across the breakfast table, destruction is just another word for new beginnings. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find everything you actually needed. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, first love gets a second chance to become forever love. The business card I carried for 55 years is framed now, sitting on Robert's desk in his office. A reminder that some promises are worth keeping, even when it takes more than half a century to fulfill them, especially then. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.